All right, today we're going to learn a different way to solve quadratic equations. And what we've done before is solved by factoring. We moved the 15 over, and so you ended up with x squared plus 2x minus 15 equals 0. And then you factored it so that those factors, when they multiplied together, gave you this original quadratic equation. So x times x will give you your x squared. This negative means one of your factors is positive, one is negative. We need two numbers that add to be 2 and multiply to be negative 15. Well, that would be positive 5 and negative 3. And so remember what we did the last two lessons. Then you set each factor equal to 0, which means that you want the value of x that would make this set of parentheses equal 0. So in this case, it would be x equals negative 5, and here it would be x equals 3. And that would be your two answers. Well, there's another way we can solve these, and that's using the quadratic formula. And this is critical, especially when you can't factor. Now, sometimes it doesn't matter. If you can factor it, you can solve it either way. If you can't factor it, then you have to use the quadratic formula. And this is the quadratic formula. It looks pretty complicated, but it's not too bad. And if you notice, you get your a, b, and c from where they're located in this standard form. A is in front of the x squared term, b is in front of the x, and c is the constant. So let's use the quadratic formula to solve this same equation. There's nothing in front of the x squared, so that means there's a 1. The a is 1. If you remember, a goes here, b here, and c here. So b is 2, and c is negative 15. Okay? So we're going to put it in the quadratic formula. X equals negative b, so that's negative 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's 2 squared, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2a. Now, the easiest way to not make a mistake with your calculator is to put only what is under the radical, which means under the square root sign. In the calculator. I wish I could write better with this Moby, but I can't. In the calculator. Okay. So put only what's under the radical in the calculator, and then put it in then do the math. Now, once you get what's under the calculator, then you could, if you had to use it, you could use it for the other things, but don't try to do it all at once. So here we have, let's simplify, we have x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 plus 15 times, if you can think, if it confuses you with this minus, think of this as plus and negative. And so we have negative 4 times negative 15 is 60. So we have 4 plus 60 over 2. And so that is then x is negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 64 over 2. Well, we can take a nice even square root of 64. That's 8. So we have x equals negative 2 plus or minus 8 over 2. Now from this point, you need to make you have two different answers. And so you're going to make solve one with the plus. So you have x equals negative 2 plus 8 over 2. And you have x equals negative 2 minus 8 over 2. That's what that plus or minus means. You're going to do One solution with the plus and one with the minus. So negative 2 plus 8 is 6, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. Negative 2 minus 8 is negative 10. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. And if you notice, we came up with the exact same answers that we got doing it by factoring. So again, if your instructions say solve by factoring, you're going to solve by factoring. If they say solve using the quadratic formula, then you're going to solve using the quadratic formula, even if you can factor. And if it says just solve it, you can use either method you like. If you can't factor it, your only option will be to use the quadratic formula. Okay, let's move on. Okay. We have 3 more examples. And so here, A is negative 2, B is negative 4, and C is 3. Well, anytime you have negatives thrown into the mix, you get a little more complicated. But let's put it in the quadratic formula. We have x equals negative 4, that's your negative b, plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times 3, that's 4ac, over 2a. 2 times negative 2. All right, if you want to make this a plus negative, you can see that these 2 negatives are going to cancel. A little glitch. So we have x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times 3 over 2 times negative 2. A is negative 2, B is negative 4, and C is 3. Okay. Now, again, if you put only what's in the square root under the radical, this is positive 16. Remember, do not enter this without parentheses, a negative and squared, or you're going to get a negative number. So that's positive 16 plus 24. So you've got 4 plus or minus the square root of 40, all of that over negative 4. Now this you're going to have to put in the calculator and get an estimate. And there is a way to simplify under the radical. We will learn that later in the year, and you'll use it a lot in geometry to get an exact answer. What you get in the calculator is an estimated answer. But you'll do 4 plus the square root of 40. I would hit enter after you put the numerator in, and then divide that by negative 4. And so when you get your rounded answer, it's going to be negative 2.6 about. And then the other x will be 4 minus the square root of 40 over negative 4. And you'll round that, and that'll be about 0.6. And those will be your 2 answers. Okay. On number 3, A is 2, B is 3, and C is negative 2. You're going to put those in the quadratic formula. X equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 2. All of that over 2 times 2. So we end up with negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 plus 16, which is 25. All of that over 4. And so for our solutions, we have negative 3 plus 5, because the square root of 25 is 5 over 4, and negative 3 minus 5 over 4. Okay. Negative 3 plus 5 is 2, so that's 2/4, and you're going to reduce that to 1/2. And negative 3 minus 5 is negative 8 over 4, which gives you negative 2. So there's my two answers for number 3. And for the last one, we have A is 6, B is negative 3, and C is 7. So when we put that in the quadratic formula, we have x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 3 squared minus 4 times 6 times 7, all of that over 2 times 6, which gives me 3 plus or minus the square root. Put this in your calculator, and then you end up with negative 159 over 12. Now, if you try to enter square root of negative 159 in your calculator, the square root of any negative number is going to say error. Okay, so you can't take the square root of negative 159. So what you're going to write is no solution. But in fact, later you're going to learn how to solve these numbers that have a negative. It is a complex number. So what I really want you to write is no real solution. Okay, that's going to be your answer if you ever end up with a negative under the square root or under the radical.